Katsuki Bakugo was really pissed off before, wait until you see this week's episode of My Hero Academia. His fuse has officially been lit. After being defeated by Izuku Midoriya and being one-upped by all the other students from Class 1A, Katsuki Bakugo is in a weird position. He realizes that he's going to have to prove himself not just to Izuku, but to the other kick-ass students, all of which have amazing powers, and that's probably my favorite thing about this week's episode, is getting to see more of the other students and what their powers are all about. It's really hard to choose a favorite because, frankly, I love all of them. They're so freaking unique. There's Mina, the adorable bug girl, who apparently has the ability to spew this, poisonous, corrosive acid-like stuff, which she can actually surf on, which I think is pretty damn awesome. There's also Suyu, the frog girl. There's really not much more to her powers aside from the fact that she's half human, half frog. There's also Masharao, who's this character who has this ridiculously oversized tail. Apparently that's his power, just having a big muscular tail. I'm sure it comes in handy. There's also Denki, who has the power of electricity. He also has the power of failure, because he tries to hit on Ochako in this week's episode, but when Izuku shows up, she just decides to go right to his side. One of my personal favorites from this episode was the character of Eijiro, who apparently has the ability to harden certain parts of his body. So essentially, he can turn his arms into spears, which he can use to just pretty much crush anything. There's also Meizo, who's this character who has 6 arms, and as if that weren't enough, that could just be his power, that he has multiple arms, certain parts of his appendages can actually transform into other body parts, such as hands, arms, legs, and even a mouth to communicate. This is overall just a really weird-looking character, but I'll be damned if he doesn't look badass. There's also the dark and stoic Kyoka, who apparently can literally hook herself up to any building so that she can analyze it. I don't know, it's a weird power. Speaking of weird powers, there's also Hanta, who apparently can summon tape from his elbows. That's the way he, flies around and stuff. Think Spider-Man with adhesive tape. And let's not forget the invisible girl Toru, whose powers simply are just being invisible, and apparently naked. There's also Momo, who does a really great job of knocking Katsuki Bakugo down a peg or two by illustrating why he messed up so much in the battle, because his battle with Izuku was so personal to him that he wasn't even thinking about the mission. Not to mention, you had Izuku Midoriya, who was acting so rash, and then you had Ochako, who, again, was doing the same thing, which made Ida Tenya the MVP of their battle, which was a really funny twist, not to mention he was, of course, elated by this. However, my 2 favorite characters that they introduced formally in this episode are Fumikage and Shoto. Fumikage is this character whose face is literally that of a crow, and he also has the ability to conjure shadows and weaponize them in a number of interesting ways. We actually get to see these giant black shadows come out from his back. I can't wait to see more of his powers. And then there is Shoto, the ice guy, who originally I thought his powers were simply just going to be another ice thing. No, actually it's a little bit more than that. Half of his power is ice, the other half of his power is heat. Ice and fire together. That is really awesome, and he's also the very first character that makes Katsuki Bakugo realize, oh shit, I'm not as badass as I thought I actually was. Because when he goes into this mission, he freezes the entire building to the point where no one can move, he wins the day, and then he actually melts all of the ice with his heat powers. This Shoto guy is gonna be freaking great. But the main focus of this week's episode is definitely on Katsuki Bakugo, who is basically just stewing the entire episode and realizing that he's just not as powerful as he actually thought he was. There are a lot of other characters here who are going to be a big threat to him and his ability to be number 1. And that confrontation he had with Izuku at the end of the episode was very interesting. You almost felt that Izuku was going to get through to him, especially because he really told him everything so bluntly. He didn't want to use his powers that he was borrowing to simply kill him. He wants to be able to defeat him with his own powers when he has complete control of this. However, this just bolsters Katsuki even more, and he continues to want to be number 1. Even after All Might tries to talk to him, he just sort of shrugs his shoulders at him and claims, no, I'm going to do it my own way. Katsuki Bakugo is such a pissed off, over-the-top character, but you just can't help but be entertained by him. And then there's the end of the episode, the post-credit scene, which teases the very first major villain of the series. And describing what this guy looks like is a little strange. Essentially, it's this one gray-haired guy who has all of these disembodied hands all over his body, with this one that's directly on his face, so you actually cannot see him. I'm not sure what his powers are. Maybe he's able to control all of these hands at once. Maybe he can use them as weapons. I'm not really sure. All I know is the design of this guy is super unique, and I love it. Especially because we're finally about to get our first major villain of the series. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of My Hero Academia? This episode did a great job of introducing a lot of the cool characters from My Hero Academia who are just so unique, and I didn't even have the time to talk about all of them. I think another one of my favorite characters is the character of Minoru. He's that one little guy who has like the weird like black balls on his head. What's really funny about his character though is that he's such an extreme pervert. Every single time he sees like a girl that he likes, or at least a feature that he likes, he gives them a big old thumb up, especially when he's teamed up with Momo. He's a really enduring and funny character, and that's the thing, it's really hard to choose who my favorite is, because they're all so damned unique. But as I said earlier, this week's episode is all about Katsuki Bakugo realizing the mistakes he made during this big test and trying to reassess how he's going to be #1 again. It wasn't just Izuku, it was seeing all of the other students just completely destroy this test, and considering that nobody else got hurt too, that really had to hurt his pride as well. Honestly, I can't say enough good things about this episode right here. I loved getting to see some of the powers of the other characters, and I want to spend a lot more time with them. But as we get closer to the end of this season, I honestly don't know how they're going to be able to wrap this up in a nice bow. Maybe they're just going to do one small season of this series a year. Honestly, if they can do that to keep the quality up, I am completely okay with that. That being said, this was another fantastic episode of My Hero Academia with good production value, lots of cool characters, and a really great message with the introduction of a brand new villain at the very end. Make sure to check that out. There's also a few other characters who appear, like this big giant crow monster with an exposed brain. You might have actually seen this guy in the intro of the show. All Might's fighting against him. Maybe that's what this is all going to be leading up to. All I know is, great episode of My Hero Academia. I really dug this one a lot. I also really like the fact that Izuku is not really seen as like a wimp to like any of the other members of the class. They all really do look up to him. By the end of the episode, when he comes back from the nurse's office, they're all just lining up to just say hello to him and hang out with him. It's really great how far his character has come, and I can't wait to see more of his growth in the rest of My Hero Academia. So this was another fantastic episode right here. Not a perfect episode. I think that the pacing was maybe just a little off in some parts, and some of the focus was sort of all over the place. Still, it was entertaining as all hell, which is definitely a reason to check out this episode. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Check it out, My Hero Academia fans. You might see something you like. But if any of you guys did watch this week's episode of My Hero Academia, please tell me what you thought about it in the comments section below. And I know it's a little early to start saying this, but if you guys have a favorite hero from the classroom, tell me who it is in the comments section below and why. Was there a character who was introduced in this week's episode who showed off their powers that you really like? Please tell me. You guys are awesome! Thank you for watching this review. I really appreciate it. If you want to help subscribe to the channel, maybe you could hit that like button right down below. Maybe you could subscribe to the channel. That way you'll be able to see all of our latest anime and manga reviews and our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. Make sure to check that out. You guys can find links for that, all types of other cool stuff, in the description box below. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!